Before World War II, wars were believed to be won by firepower and machines. What most underestimated was information, and how quickly it could decide victory. The war with Japan had been won before it was ever fought. Victory started long before the first shot. It started with data and communication. The man who made this possible did not command troops. He gave information rules, limits, and structure. He was a mathematician named Claude Shannon. Claude Elwood Shannon was born in 1916 in Petoskey, Michigan, United States. He grew up in a non-scientific family. His father was a judge, his mother a school principal. There was no military or engineering tradition in his background. He studied electrical engineering and mathematics at the University of Michigan, completing both degrees in the mid-1930s. This double specialization was uncommon. At the time, electrical engineering focused on practical systems, while mathematics remained abstract. Shannon deliberately chose both. In 1936, Shannon entered MIT as a graduate student and joined the team working on the differential analyzer, an early analog computing machine designed to solve complex equations mechanically. His task was not theoretical. He worked on the electromechanical relay circuits used to control the machine. During this work, Shannon made a critical observation. He recognized that electrical switching circuits could directly represent Boolean logic. Logical operations such as AND or a NOT could be physically implemented using relays. This connection between logic and circuitry had not been formally established before. In 1937, Shannon published his master's thesis, A Symbolic Analysis of Relay and Switching Circuits. The paper demonstrated that logical reasoning could be mechanized. It provided a systematic method to design complex circuits using algebraic logic instead of trial and error. This work later became the foundation of digital circuit design. After completing his studies, Shannon joined Bell Telephone Laboratories in 1941. Bell Labs was responsible for the reliability of the American communication network. The laboratory supported military and civilian communication systems, including long-distance telephone, encrypted signals, and transmission under noise. Shannon's work focused on signal degradation, noise, and reliability. He analyzed how information changes during transmission, how errors appear, and how systems could be designed to minimize loss. These problems became critical as the United States entered World War II. Modern warfare required secure, fast, and reliable communication across continents. Radio signals were vulnerable. Messages were intercepted. Errors had strategic consequences. Shannon's mathematical approach addressed these challenges at a fundamental level. By the time the US military recognized that communication itself had become a strategic domain, Claude Shannon had already developed the tools needed to understand and control it. If you're enjoying this documentary, consider liking the video and subscribing. It really helps support the work. And here's a question for you. How different do you think World War II would have been if the United States had not gained a mathematical advantage in communication? During World War II, the United States faced a communication problem that existing engineering could not fully explain. Radio messages degraded over distance. Noise altered signals unpredictably. Encryption systems increased complexity, but also amplified transmission errors. At scale, communication reliability became a limiting factor. Claude Shannon's wartime work focused on understanding this limitation mathematically. Instead of treating errors as isolated failures, Shannon analyzed communication as a system governed by probability. He examined how information behaved when transmitted through noisy channels, and how much distortion could be tolerated before a message lost meaning. This shifted the problem from hardware performance to measurable limits. One of the central challenges was that engineers did not know how much information a channel could reliably carry. Stronger signals did not guarantee accuracy. Repeating messages increased clarity but reduced efficiency. There was no framework to balance speed, accuracy, and reliability. Shannon addressed this by separating information from its physical carrier. He defined information in terms of uncertainty reduction rather than signal strength. This allowed communication systems to be evaluated independently of specific technologies such as radio, wire, or cable. These principles were applied directly to wartime systems. Secure transatlantic communication between Allied leadership relied on controlled redundancy, noise management, and synchronization. The Sigsaly system, used for encrypted conversations between Roosevelt and Churchill, depended on statistical properties of signals rather than secrecy alone. Although developed by a team, its reliability rested on the same probabilistic understanding of information Shannon was formalizing. Shannon also analyzed how errors accumulated across long communication chains. He demonstrated that errors could be detected and corrected if systems were designed with sufficient redundancy and structure. This made it possible to transmit messages accurately even when individual components failed or signals were partially corrupted. Importantly, Shannon did not design operational radios or encryption devices. His contribution was analytical. He defined the conditions under which reliable communication was mathematically possible. This allowed engineers to design systems that approached those limits instead of relying on trial and error. By the later years of the war, these ideas influenced how military communication systems were evaluated. Reliability was no longer judged by anecdotal performance but by calculated margins. Systems that could not meet these criteria were redesigned or rejected before deployment. The result was a measurable increase in communication stability across Allied operations. Messages arrived faster, with fewer errors, and with predictable failure boundaries. Command decisions increasingly depended on communication systems, whose behavior was mathematically understood. Shannon's wartime work did not remain classified forever. After the war, the same framework became the foundation of modern information theory. But, during the conflict, its impact was immediate and practical. It transformed communication from an engineering gamble into a calculable system. By the end of World War II, the United States no longer treated information as an abstract concept. It had become a quantifiable resource, governed by limits that could be measured, predicted, and engineered. When World War II ended, the communication systems built under wartime pressure did not disappear. They expanded. Military networks were repurposed for civilian use. Telephone exchanges scaled nationally. Radio links crossed continents. Early computers began exchanging data. The same problems that had limited wartime communication now defined the post-war world. The difference was that these problems were no longer unexplained. The mathematical framework developed during the war made it possible to move beyond improvisation. Communication systems were no longer evaluated by anecdotal reliability or field experience alone. They were analyzed against measurable limits. In 1948, Claude Shannon published a mathematical theory of communication. The paper did not introduce a new device or technology. It formalized the principles that had guided wartime solutions and extended them into a general theory. Shannon defined information independently of meaning. Messages were treated as sequences governed by probability. Uncertainty could be measured. Noise could be modeled. Errors could be anticipated rather than observed after failure. One concept became central: channel capacity. Shannon demonstrated that every communication channel has a maximum rate at which information can be transmitted with arbitrarily low error. This boundary, later known as the Shannon limit, was absolute. No improvement in materials, power, or hardware could exceed it. This result unified everything engineers had struggled with during the war. Encryption, redundancy, error correction, and signal strength were no longer separate concerns. They became variables within a single system constrained by mathematical limits. Engineers could now predict whether a communication system would succeed before building it. Post-war engineering adopted this approach rapidly. Radar networks, early warning systems, aviation communication, and long-distance telephony were redesigned using calculated margins instead of empirical guesswork. Reliability was no longer a matter of confidence, it was a matter of proof. The same framework also resolved a growing problem in computing. As digital machines expanded, they relied on binary states that had to remain distinct in the presence of noise. Shannon's work provided the conditions under which digital information could be stored and transmitted reliably at scale. By the early Cold War, information had become a defined engineering resource. Its behavior was predictable, its limits were measurable, its failure modes were understood. What had begun as a wartime necessity became a permanent foundation. Claude Shannon did not describe how to build better radios or faster computers. He defined the conditions under which any such system could function reliably. In doing so, he transformed communication from an experimental craft into a disciplined science. The consequences extended far beyond the war that had forced these questions into focus. After the publication of his information theory, Claude Shannon did not attempt to turn his work into a doctrine or an industry. Instead, he continued exploring what information meant beyond transmission alone. His focus shifted from communication systems to how machines could store, process, and use information. In the early 1950s, Shannon built an electromechanical device known as Theseus, a maze-solving mouse. The machine could explore a maze, record its paths using relay-based memory, and then navigate the maze efficiently after learning. The project was not military and had no operational purpose. It was an experimental demonstration. Theseus showed that information could be accumulated over time and used to guide future decisions. The machine did not follow pre-programmed instructions. It adapted based on stored experience. This illustrated that information was not only something to transmit or protect, but something machines could manipulate and act upon. At the same time, Shannon continued contributing to cryptography, coding theory, and system design. During and after the war, his classified work on encryption reinforced the idea that secrecy alone was insufficient. Secure systems also required predictable behavior under noise and error. This principle became standard in modern cryptographic design. Shannon's influence extended into computing theory. His earlier connection between Boolean logic and switching circuits had already made digital machines possible. Information theory completed the picture by defining how data could be stored, copied, and transmitted reliably. Together, these ideas formed the conceptual foundation of modern computing systems. Importantly, Shannon never framed his work as artificial intelligence or machine cognition. He avoided speculative claims. His focus remained on systems, constraints, and measurable behavior. This restraint is part of why his work endured. His theories applied equally well to communication networks, computers, games, and learning systems. As technology advanced, Shannon's ideas scaled naturally. Fiber optics, satellite communication, data compression, error-correcting codes, and encrypted digital networks all operate within the limits he defined. Engineers do not design systems to exceed these limits. They design systems to approach them efficiently. Despite this impact, Shannon avoided public recognition. He did not build companies or seek influence. He worked quietly, often pursuing ideas for curiosity rather than application. His contributions spread through adoption rather than promotion. Today, information theory underlies nearly every digital system in existence. Mobile phones, internet traffic, cloud storage, navigation systems, and machine learning models all rely on principles Shannon formalized decades earlier. Most users never encounter his name, yet their technology operates according to his constraints. Claude Shannon did not invent a single machine that defined an era. He defined the rules that every modern machine must follow. Those rules emerged from wartime necessity, but extended far beyond it. His work demonstrates a recurring pattern in engineering history. The most enduring contributions are not always devices or weapons. They are the frameworks that determine what is possible. And that leaves a final question worth considering. How many modern technologies appear advanced today, while still operating within limits discovered long before they existed?